So this is the letter signed by over 1,000 public health officials arguing that while COVID-19 kills, racism predates COVID-19 and kills more, and therefore protesting is a legitimate response to the current situation, despite the fact that lockdowns are in place and still are, basically as of now. So one of the things in this letter, I'll just highlight it. No, I can't highlight it. It's right where my cursor is here. There it is. Oppose any use of tear gas, smoke, or other respiratory irritants, which could increase risk for COVID-19 by making the respiratory tract more susceptible to infection, exacerbating existing inflammation, and inducing coughing. So that's all I wanted to say there, Zach. That sounds at one level like these public health officials are trying to temper their, frankly, ludicrous assertion that it's a legitimate move to go out en masse onto the streets because this is because the killing, the senseless and violent killing of one man at the hands of a bad police officer is more of a public health threat than COVID-19. That's a ridiculous statement, right?
Yep.
But in this, they say, well, but you don't want to inflame your lungs. Sounds right. And yet one thing that you reported that this Homeland Security officer told you yesterday really puts this into stark relief, I think, which is, he said, we're having our tools taken away from us. We're having our low impact tools like smoke and even tear gas taken away. And unfortunately, that leaves us with more and more lethal tools.
Yeah. So I should probably say a little bit more. And I hope this was not said to me in confidence. He obviously wanted to talk to me for a reason that had everything to do with my public-facing life, I guess. So I'm assuming that I'm at liberty to talk about this. But he said a number of things. One is, he said they're not going to cede the federal buildings. They can't. It's their mandate not to. And
the federal officers.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that they are fully capable of protecting those buildings. What they're not fully capable of doing is protecting those buildings and keeping the rioters safe. They cannot simultaneously do that. So the point is, the rioters have a tool, which is they can force these federal officers into lethal violence, which will, of course, what do you imagine would happen at this moment in the George Floyd protests when lethal violence is brought on protesters by federal officers, right? This is potentially shot, heard around the world stuff.
Yep.
And in my opinion, the anarchists are actually looking for a massacre. And let me explain to you what I mean by that, because obviously the idea that anybody would seek to be massacred is ludicrous, and it is ludicrous. But you have how many major cities engaged in violent conflict on a daily basis now? If one of those cities sees a massacre, it does the job that the anarchists would like, right? It will be used to illustrate the illegitimacy and the overreaction of the government. And so, if you have all of these anarchists in all of these cities, the chances that you will be in the city where the massacre happens are low. So provoke, and probably it doesn't happen where you are, but it'll happen somewhere, and that's good enough. And even if you're in the city where it happens, chances that you are among the massacred, pretty low. Mm-hmm. So there's a game being played, I believe, in which the idea is to precipitate violence that will be used to justify what comes next. And the point is, just as we all take a risk when we get behind the wheel of our car, thinking it's very unlikely to be me that gets killed, there's an advantage to driving, so I'm going to accept that risk. The anarchists are accepting that risk, of a small risk of being massacred, in order to precipitate a massacre somewhere which will do their bidding. Now, the problem is that the anarchists are undercutting the legitimacy of the actual protests that started this. They've thoroughly undercut it already. And they are co-opting this movement for what I regard as a completely insane objective. They actually believe that if you tore civilization down, what would replace it would be better. Now, A, we might not survive its being torn down. And B, the chances that what replaces it is better are very near zero. It's like the argument that we should terraform Mars because the environment on the Earth is lousy. Well, the environment on the Earth is getting worse. It's always going to be harder to terraform Mars. Is America a fair place? I don't think it's fair enough. I think we have real problems. But the chances that tearing it down is going to create a fair replacement, no, it's going to create a power vacuum. And what's going to happen in a power vacuum is the powerful are going to rise. You're going to make things far worse. So the anarchists don't have the right to push us into this madness. What they do potentially have is the power. And why do they have the power? They have the power because somehow we have been led to accept a world in which those who would lead are doing something that sort of sounds like leadership, but it doesn't have the power. People can click away from their would-be leaders on the internet, where they follow their leaders to useful effect in many cases, historically speaking. So how the heck are we going to bail ourselves out of the situation so a small, really tiny number of anarchists don't lead the rest of us into a conflagration that all will end up regretting?